2 seconds. It's just waiting. Alright, we're going live. You're live.
How we going?
Here we are. We're live.
Awesome.
Okay, good morning everybody. Hello, it is December 20th. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Melbourne, and I've got some of the biggest decision makers and movers and shakers here from the Oxen team, here to answer some questions from the community. We've got, for those of you who've been around for a while, we've done roundtables in the past. We've changed it up a little bit by calling it a lab meeting. Now it kind of ties in nicely with the lab updates and Oxen Labs and all of that stuff. The way that it's basically going to run is, as you would know, we've been taking questions for the last week or so. So we've got about 20 questions that we've got from the community, which we'll go through, which are all for Key, Jason, and Chris here. Unfortunately, Josh couldn't be here with us today. And then we're going to go through all of those. And for those of you who are with us live, you will also be able to ask some lovely questions for the fellows that we have here. And then we'll wrap it up. I think we've got about an hour all together today. And then we'll see how we go. We might go a little bit over, a little bit under, but we'll see how many questions we can get through. We'll try to get through as many as possible. So first of all, we'll go through some introductions, just in case you guys don't already know everybody that's here in the room with us right now. So first of all, I'll hand it over to Key, our CTO.
Hey guys, CTO, Key here. Mostly deal with the development side of things, managing the development team, deciding what our priorities are going to be, developing new products, writing new features. I don't really code much day to day, but spend a lot of time on the architecture side and decision making side. So yeah, if you haven't met me, nice to meet you.
Next up is our new and fresh CEO, Chris.
Hi everybody. So I'm one of the co-founders of the project. Been here from the get-go with Key, and unfortunately Josh was unable to make it. So from my perspective, I really focus on the future and what we're going to do to get our products, project, and community to all come together to make sure that we are successful and growing in a really effective way. So I only recently took over the CEO role, at least publicly as well. And yeah, it's been really good. It's been exciting, and I'm really looking forward to next year and seeing where we can take this.
And next up we have Jason, who I believe has a new title. So correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe he is our Chief Software Architect.
Yeah, that's what it says now on my contract. So that's kind of cool. I was filling in a role I've been kind of doing for quite a while here. So. But yeah, no, it's nice to have a new title for it. So yeah, brief overview if you don't know me. I kind of have my hands in all of our technical implementations. How are we going to approach problems? How are we going to get all the pieces of the network working together? How are we going to handle our cryptography? And that sort of stuff. Day to day, I work on a lot of our backend stuff. Recently on the session open group server. But then I also work in Core, I work in LokiNet, so I'm kind of spread all over the project.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for all of your intros, everybody, and I think we will jump straight into some questions to try and move things along. So the first question that we have here is for Key. So Session on Android has a lot of issues. Will we see an increased effort to fix them? Or does the completion and integration of libsession have priority?
That's an interesting question because they're not necessarily different goals there. The completion of libsession or libsession util, which we're calling it internally, or that's the repository name, actually solves a lot of the issues that session is facing, or is hoping to solve a lot of the issues that session is facing. So to give an example, our configuration message management is quite bad right now, which is basically the method that we use to, when you restore a device or link a new device, to get information from the other device about your account. Say, for example, profile information, contact lists, open groups you've joined to, And this experience is somewhat buggy right now, but we are rewriting that currently in libsession util, so that we can share that code across all platforms. It's more consistent, it's better functioning than what we had before, and then we'll kind of import that into all of the session implementations that will share all of that same common code, and that's hoping to fix up that. And one of the next things that we're doing in libsession util is with closed groups as well. So we're moving a lot of closed group functionality into libsession util, so it functions the same way, and we can focus all of our effort on making that area of the code base work properly and as we expect it to. So yeah, they're not necessarily different things. There are, of course, some tasks which are not going to be covered by libsession util. For example, a lot of the platform-specific performance tasks will need to be looked into individually on each platform, at least at the current moment. As we move more stuff into libsession util, that will become less of a problem. But right now, we're looking at Android performance to try and improve that, because as you join a lot of open groups, we're very aware that the app starts to slow down and becomes very hard to use. So yeah, we're aware of most of the issues that the community is reporting, and we're devising strategies to work on them if we're not already working on them already.
Let me just add briefly, libsession util is one of the things that I've been pushing us to do for quite a long time. So I'm really happy that we're doing it now. But one of the big things that it does is free up the session front-end developers to work on fixing front-end bugs, because they don't have to work on the back-end stuff as much, because we're now abstracting it here and doing it just in one place consistently.
Wonderful. Next question is for Chris. Funnily enough, this is something I've actually worked on with Chris as well. So the OPTF stopped filing transparency reports in 2019. Why is that? And is there another place to check in on how much funding the project has remaining?
Yeah, it's been unfortunate that there's been a bit of delay with the sort of the audits and the transparency reports. As I guess a lot of the community would be aware, on the first audit that we went to do, it took about a year and a half, because we do go to a third party. We go to a third party auditor to go through everything. The first one's about a year and a half delay, and then the next one was another about a year, because we changed auditors because we're sort of frustrated by the first delay. But then that caused further delays. It's a game that it's something that we're trying to catch up on. I do see by hopefully next half of 2023 we'll have all of them up to date and available for the community. We're just sort of held up by third parties. I have made some calls recently. I have tried to push things along. It's been unfortunate. We'll do what we can, and we'll get them out to the community, because I think we're in a pretty good position. It'd be really nice for everyone to see, with a bit more transparency, where we stand. And in terms of other areas to see the project's funding, I'm not too sure. We can think about something, but usually there's that. We try not to, we don't want to put all our cards out there. We don't want to give out all of the information, because it stops us being able to negotiate and bargain with people if they know exactly how much money we have in our accounts.
That all makes sense. All right, first question for Jason. When do you plan to release Lokinet to the Play Store? I know this is a bit of a complicated one.
When it's ready, I guess. So our priorities for Lokinet are mobile development is a little bit outside of the core Lokinet dev team. And so we have this Lokinet Android version that is working, and it's been sort of working here and there off and on for a while, but it's very far from being a polished, ready for release thing. So we don't have a concrete plan to say we're going to do it on a particular time. We do have a bunch of other stuff we want to do in Lokinet. For example, getting a session to start speaking over Lokinet. So there's exit marketplaces. It's another thing that we want to look at on the Lokinet side of things. So there's a bunch of stuff there. As much as it'd be nice to put a bunch of time into developing the Android one so that it's sort of release ready, there's a lot of other nice things to happen at the same time too. So it's yeah, I can't say when. It is something we'd love to have out, but it requires a fair amount of work.
Naturally. So this one is for Key. What resources from the Oxen team, if any, are working on cross-chain integrations? And as a bit of a follow-up, do you know anything about the Maya protocol or the Black protocol?
I've not heard of those protocols specifically. Cross-chain integrations, probably the last work that we did on that was with the Ethereum bridge that we have for Oxen, which is still running. You can get, I think is it OX? No, sorry, I'm thinking about other stuff. You can get, what's the name of the call? Wrapped Oxen? W Oxen. There we go. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so we worked on that, but we haven't really done much more work on cross-chain integration yet. That's mainly sitting with Chainflip, who we're still obviously very close with, seeing as Simon is the CEO there, and we still have like weekly discussions with him. So we're really leaning on the Chainflip integration side of things for the cross-chain aspect, and hoping to work on integration with them so we can get access to the cross-chain swapping service that they're obviously hoping to launch soonish.
Great. I've got this question tagged for Chris, but Key and Jason, feel free to jump in if you think that you have a compelling answer to it. As a little thought experiment, this question's a bit lighter. If someone was willing to volunteer or work with Oxen or the team, who would you most be excited to work with?
Someone else can try and take that first. I want to think about it for a second.
I mean, obviously Elon Musk, right? That wasn't a serious answer before people start quoting me.
Like if we lost half the team, Jason, if you jumped on board, you want to, I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, Elon Musk, like he'd be very interesting as a person, but just how he sort of interacts with projects is pretty aggressive. Yeah, do you have anyone, Key, that you'd want to work with or have us supervise to get us excited?
I mean, it's probably because I just came off a call that we were having regarding like censorship resistance, because we're looking into that area pretty heavily right now. I mean, I'd love to have someone who has a lot of expertise in the censorship resistance space. So like someone who's worked on one of these networks which is able to evade censorship. For example, Siphon Lantern. There's a lot of them out there that are working on that service. So like it would be amazing to have someone from that side come and help us with session censorship resistance. It's a really tricky problem that requires like someone, either a service or like someone who's very knowledgeable on how networks block individuals from accessing other networks. So yeah, super interesting, and I'd love to have someone from that space in the team.
I'm going to throw out a slightly unexpected answer here. I would actually prefer, well, and maybe not prefer, but personally, the thing that I'd really like to happen in the project is not that there's any one big contributor who comes in, but that we've got a lot of small contributors who come in and just say, hey, I want to help out with this open source project. And we're seeing some of that now, and I really appreciate it every time a PR shows up where someone wants to add something in there. Because I think that ultimately, we're still building all of the stuff we have, but ultimately these should be open source, open contribution projects.
I agree with that concept. I do like the idea of not one person with, maybe a big ego that's publicly known to come in and get us excited. It's more about how can the project get a life of its own and sort of have a community of excitement. Yeah.
I find it interesting, Key, that you brought up, bringing somebody in who has experience building censorship-resistant networks and things like that. You mentioned Siphon and Lantern, because I do have a question here about blocking in Iran. Do we have plans to adjust sessions so that state firewalls are unable to block it, and if so, when?
Yeah, we definitely have plans, but like we're in the exploratory stage right now. And making sure, like, trying to see if any of those plans work, and there's a lot of tools out there right now to help people evade censorship, but there's also a question as to how resistant they are in our like specific network scenario, and then also like the cost that would be to a session user, or the cost that we would have to take on as an organization to provide that service to our session users in certain countries. So yeah, it's definitely a big question that we're looking into, because obviously we understand that massive amount of growth has been in these countries where the internet is really censored, and we'd love to continue that growth and provide people who are in those particular network conditions like access to session, because it's probably more important there than it is maybe anywhere else. So yeah, definitely something we're looking into. I can't really give a time frame right now because we're like pretty early in some of the discussions. So, and we don't necessarily know whether these ideas are going to work. We just can do our best and see how it goes.
I mean, we do have to be a little bit cautious going down that road, because if you look at sort of the history of the Tor project, what you see is they spent a huge amount of time and money to try to evade say the Chinese Great Firewall, and they can succeed briefly for a small period of time, but then China steps up the game to block them again, to block whatever new approach they use. So it's this massive potential massive resource hog that may not even get you anywhere. It's not like we can say, hey, let's figure out a solution and then just put it in and hey, we're done. It's let's figure out the solution that will get us 2 weeks down the road while we figure out another solution for the next 2 weeks, and so on and so on.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge cat and mouse game.
Such is the nature of so much of the work that we do, to be honest. The next question specifically mentions the tech team, but I'm going to throw this one to you, Chris, because I think it actually applies not only to the tech team, but the rest of the team as well. Are there any routine retrospective conversations in the team for improving the development process and helping each other grow?
Yeah, I won't go too much into the dev side, but yeah, as a project, we often do sort of after action reviews. We'll go out, do an experiment. You make a mistake, you do something well, you do something wrong. You always need to sit back and go like, what do we want to take from this, and how do we want to do better in the future? I think in the community, people assume that we don't do this. Maybe it does come up often that, oh, you guys did a mistake. But from our perspective, we want to do a mistake. We don't want to do a mistake, but we want to assess if we've done a mistake and then work on improving that and doing better in the future. So yeah, we do these after action reviews. They're very helpful. We never want to not learn from something. And in terms of the dev team, though, I will say we do sort of, we try and work out how long something's going to take, and we sort of break down everything as much as we can and really try to work out when and how we can get things done so we can like deliver it to the community. And that's something that we constantly review as well. So it's when it comes to like marketing, it's those sort of after action reviews and sort of experimental content. And with development, it's about sort of trying to work out how long something's going to take, and then like getting to that goal and then looking back as well. We also do sort of half time check-ins as well to be like, how are we going? And yeah, so there's a few things that we do. We always try to stay on top of this, and yeah, it seems to be working pretty well so far.
Yeah, we'll do specific reviews as well when a particular event happens. For example, like if the server goes down or something, we'll try and ensure that if that were to happen again, that we would be able to, reboot it faster or have a person on call to be able to deal with it. But yeah, we are a fairly small team, so we are not going to have the same level of like responsiveness as someone like WhatsApp or Amazon or something, right? But we definitely are striving to get to a point where we can reduce the amount of time that it takes to respond to issues, critical issues especially.
Yeah, for sure. This next question is for you, Jason. Actually, this came up during Chris's AMA that he did when it was announced that he was taking over as the CEO, and I kind of spoke to you about it a little bit, and then eventually we decided that it would be best probably to just address it during this event. And of course, it's about the low-cost multinodes. So we're currently on a road to centralizing the network via those low-cost multinodes. Will this be addressed? How and when? I know this is probably going to be a bit of a long answer.
Yeah, it's a long answer, and it comes up. I've answered it a few times because it comes up a lot. So the reason that we're not doing anything about them is when the sort of diversity that we really care about is diversity of control. And so if you've got one service node operator who controls 50 nodes, it doesn't really matter if those are spread among 50 different VPSs or they're clustered on a couple of big beefy dedicated servers. In terms of diversity, we have one operator controlling 50 of them. So if you look at the foundation nodes that I run, well, you've got me here in control of all those nodes, and it doesn't matter how many different servers they're spread over. So to the extent that we want to do something about the diversity, I'm not sure that we'd accomplish anything by trying to weed out individual IPs. I mean, there's so many ways that you can work around it. You just rent different IPs on your big server. So we would probably only end up making it look more diverse, but not actually being any more diverse. And what are we really accomplishing by that? Might make us feel good, but at the end of the day, if we're not getting anything from that, let's not put ourselves in a place where we're going to just create an incentive for people to hide what they're doing. Could probably go on and on about this, but I'll just leave it there for a moment.
I'm sure you could. I remember when I was speaking to you about it last time and reading one of your responses, and it took me a couple of minutes to process all of the information that had just been laid on me as someone who was new to the problem. This next question, I'll leave it open to everybody.
Actually, let me just continue just a little bit on that point. So they're often being referred to as low-cost nodes, but they're really not. So we run all of our foundation servers are on these so-called multinodes, and it's not saving us anything in terms of actual cost of what we'd be paying if we went out on VPS. The cost it's not, we could do it cheaper by going to sort of bargain basement VPS, or we could, there are some expensive VPSs out there too that we could use, but we're not doing it to save money. We're just doing it because that's an easier way to manage the number of nodes that we have. So yeah, this idea that somehow this is clustering a bunch of low cost stuff and overloading it is kind of, it's not what's actually happening out there. Now, I have spoken and I've had people come and say, hey, I'm running this on my server, and they have a significantly overloaded server. Where I think we had one guy who was running like 30 or 40 nodes on one server that didn't even have SSDs in the server. It was all spinning hard drives, and a service node upgrade came out, and oh, look, his server couldn't handle the load of upgrading all of these, and he had all sorts of trouble. Well, he deserved to have that trouble. So, if you're going to go down this road, you kind of have to know what you're doing. And so this is why I don't really push it. You won't find it in our official documentation on how to set this up. But if you are comfortable running a server, we're not going to block you from doing that, because I'd rather you do it in a way that makes sense rather than try to hack something together that probably makes things worse.
We wouldn't really be able to block you either from doing it. As Jason was saying, you can just rent IP addresses on most of these VPS providers, which you can, provision to whatever server you're running. So for the network, it looks like, or it appears that you're operating from different IP addresses, but it's all running on the same server anyway. So, unless we want to implement like some more complicated like geo kind of latency stuff, which would maybe work out whether you're in the same area, but even then, like, it's very hard to work out whether someone is the same operator or a different operator if we don't use KYC on the network, which we're not going to do.
And one IP address costs you about $2 a month or less. So it's not like it would be a big burden if someone really is determined to cram a bunch of stuff onto one machine. To get different IP addresses to make it look like it's more than one.
Right. it did end up being as long-winded as I thought. When you first finished, I thought, oh, gee, that was much shorter than I expected it to be.
Now, disappointed, so.
I felt a bit disappointed, to be honest with you. Moving on. And like I said before, this one is open for everybody. If you can think of something or something comes to mind. So, common challenges. What are the most repeated challenges you face when working on Oxen, Session, and Multinode? Feel free to choose from technical, management, funding, marketing, anything that you can think of. And I'll take one challenge from each of you.
I mean, I can jump in. I mean, I think most of the issues that we've faced on session development are problems of scale. So something might work quite well. Like, for example, open group moderation was working. Well, we didn't really need any open group moderation at the start because the open groups were so small and there weren't that many people joining, and it was mostly people who really understood what session was and what we were trying to build towards. But as the community has grown and we're onboarding, say, for example, all of the Iranian users that onboarded recently, we have thousands of people joining the open group each day and speaking in Farsi, which is not the language of the open group. So it creates this group of people is speaking in Farsi and then a group is speaking in English, and it just all becomes cluttered. So we had to build out a specific we had built out a whisper system to be able to individually send messages to those people to say, there's a Farsi group over here, go and join that Farsi group, and not transmit their Farsi messages into the open group itself. So that's just one example, but there's probably another 100 examples that have come from scaling session that end up taking up a lot of dev time and resources that we may not have necessarily seen on our roadmap before we started running into them.
I'll go next. So from the Lokinet perspective, I think one of the things that we run into most often is where we're trying to fight against very early decisions that were made in Lokinet, where the time frame was we want to get this thing out as absolute fast as possible. So we tended to cut a lot of corners to try and get something out, and it didn't actually work. I mean, Lokinet is a very complex piece of software, and so we're now, even now 3 years later, we're facing issues where there are problems that we're running into, and it's somewhat related to Key's point about scalability, but there's problems that we were running into that are a consequence of us trying to get it out really fast 3 years ago. So one of the things that we have to sort of do is sometimes force ourselves to slow down a little bit so that we actually get this thing out solid and stable, rather than rushing it out. I think that may apply a little bit to session as well. There have definitely been some things in session that, if a year and a half ago we'd slowed down a little bit and before we rolled it out, we might have saved some quite a bit of time later on in having to come back and fix things.
I think one of the reasons behind that is sort of in the crypto space, though. People have very short attention span. And if we look at these other crypto projects, it's sort of copy paste code, do a small change. Oh, I've done this incredible thing and it's going to be the future currency of the world. And we're sort of, as much as we really don't want to, we are competing in this, this community, this crypto community, and you see these top 1,000 projects that sort of come and go with a bit of flash in the pan. And as much as we try to avoid that as much as we could, we sort of we felt like we had to move to this pace, this really, really fast pace, even though we're trying to build really long-term technology. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, but it was sort of the game that we had to play at certain times to get that MVP out, to prove that we are actually delivering technology. But anyway, my common challenge that I feel most often, at least, is keeping the community engaged. This kind of goes in the back of what Jason just said there, keeping the community engaged for a long period of time as we sort of build out and move in these different directions and scale, and just keeping that interesting, because actually building something over 3 to 5 years, it does get a little bit boring. Like, how do you make that super exciting that you're building this technology that's going to change the world in 12 to 24 months from now, when everyone else is delivering on some random promise within 30 or 60 days or something like that? So yeah, it's keeping the project, keeping the community
Maybe
engaged and
make those
excited.
promises. I don't think they're
What's that?
delivering on. They may be making promises for 30 to 60 days. I don't think they're delivering on such promises, though.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to get into specifics here. I was looking at OneCoin. I don't want to get into that rabbit hole, but you have these projects that they make some sort of promise and then they make it look like it was delivered, and people go, "Oh, well, it was delivered," and then it collapses, and they're like, "Oh, actually, I didn't know what I was looking for." So
It could happen.
yeah. Anyway, don't want to associate ourselves with those people. It's been a long journey, and keeping people excited on this long journey is a challenge. And I think we've done pretty well. We've kept the content exciting and interesting and engaging, which is, I think it's been pretty good so far.
Excellent. This question is for Chris. So if I am an investor and I want to contribute to the project in some ways so that my funds that I am investing are being used directly for development, how do I do that?
Cool. Well, funnily enough, going back to those audits, I think it's like 70 or 80% of all the money that we spend goes to developers. So pretty much most of the project's money goes to development, and then there's operations and marketing, sort of quite a small percentage of the total spend. So for one, donating to the project, just straight away 70 cents per dollar goes directly to development, which is, I don't know how other projects go, but I think that's very good. Donating to the project, buying Oxen, just engaging with the project are all sort of really fantastic ways to help the products and the tech grow. Does that sort of make sense, or is there sort of a? Do you feel like this question's sort of looking for different options to contribute to the project?
I think that makes sense, and I think those are the best options that people have available to them. We always say, even just buying and holding Oxen honestly helps quite a lot all of the time, and being active and engaged in the community is maybe not a financial way to support, but you can contribute to development directly as well. It is open source as well, so if you have those skills or want to grow those skills, that's always an option to you as well. The next question is for Key. So how do you plan to integrate the display of ONS into Session? Obviously, for those watching, ONS does already work in Session. As far as I know, you cannot do reverse lookups of IDs to ONS names. Will this ever be addressed, or is it impossible to do due to the nature of ONS?
Well, I don't think we really need to use reverse lookups to integrate ONS properly, because probably the way that it would flow is that a user would somehow link their ONS to their session inside of the session application. So the session application gets the name first, and then can understand whether it's linked to that actual session ID. And then I'm assuming that the way that it would work is that you would kind of claim to someone else that you had an ONS linked to your session ID, and they would verify that on their side to make sure that the mapping was actually correct. And that may indicate, for example, a badge that's displayed on your profile or something else. That right now that it's a little bit confusing because we have display names, nicknames, and ONS names in the application, and we haven't really kind of separated all of those out yet. We definitely want ONS names to display uniquely from nicknames and display names. But yeah, I think the reverse lookup stuff doesn't limit us too much in what we can do with the display of session names. So yeah, definitely something that we'll be looking into early next year as well with ONS, and hopefully we'll be able to get something working with in-app payments as well, so that you can choose a name in the application and then pay through Google or Apple Pay as an option, because that's going to be the easiest thing for most users, and get that name mapped and get a little kind of badge and stuff like that, and then people can just look up your name really easily.
Cool. Now back to Chris. Oxen is in a super unique position. We've got LokiNet as kind of our network layer, and then we've got our communication layer, which is Session, and then of course Oxen itself. When does the team foresee adoption on the scale of Tor, Signal, and Monero, respectively, being sort of, I guess, both the triad of products that you might compare us to?
Yeah, I guess it would be interesting if if we're at the scale of when I'll say when I'm very keen on this Tor, Signal, Monero. If we're at that scale, like what is it going to mean for those guys? What's going to happen to the whole sort of ecosystem? So anyway, try to answer that question. We are in a unique position. Yeah, it's sort of I'm quite excited by it, but I don't have like a really clear answer. Does anyone else want to jump on this one? Give me a few seconds. Can you anything?
Yeah, I mean all of these projects are like way older than us. Like Tor's been around for, I guess, going on 10, a little bit more than 10 years now. And Lokinet is not nearly that old. Session has been, I think we launched it in 2019 or something, or 2020, so around then. And Signal has been around since like, I think 2006 or 2004 or something. So, I don't think it's like a lot of this stuff is network effect. Like we've been seeing this even with Session, like, people hear about it and it might lodge in the back of their mind. But as you're alive for longer and longer, you start being taken more seriously and people will come back to the application as well. Like, for example, the application Session was in a very bad state in like when we launched it as Loki Messenger, but it's like gone, it's come so far since then. It's so much of a better application now. So I think people are revisiting it and it's becoming bigger. So, I mean, when will it get to that scale? It's impossible to know, but we're hoping soon.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, Key, I think recently I was speaking to somebody and who had gotten in touch potentially about doing some kind of integration or collaboration with Session, and I was like, oh, how did you hear about us? And they were like, oh, somebody that I know mentioned Session a couple of years ago, but I kind of forgot about it. And then they mentioned it again a couple of years later, and this time it's stuck. So, the more and more that you hear about things, and I think a lot of the time, I think Tor is one of those kinds of products as well. There are probably a lot of people out there that advocate for Tor and understand what Tor is really well, but aren't actually necessarily Tor users themselves. And I think that we're starting to see some of that happen with Session as well, where you are getting people who do have an awareness of Session and do trust it and respect it and will even recommend it as well. And getting that breakthrough and sort of that critical mass is really important for us.
Yeah, it's kind of like break down sort of a predictive like concept here. I think that at the moment, we have like a few 100,000 users on Session. We have a decent, like, 1,700 node operators and Lokinet. I can't tell you how many users we have right now. Maybe Jason has a number on top of his head. I think that there's going to be this sort of phase of where we are right now, sort of in this high growth early stage. Over the next year, between now and sort of mid next year, I would really love to see over that million mark per session in terms of, depending on how we count it, for like to prepare for monetization. And Monero, I think that it's crazy. Like, I feel like if we have this, we'll have this sort of first phase of growth where you have, you're trying to push and you're trying to like give yourself a position in the space. So say Oxen, like a top one, we're like a top 800 coin at this stage. And if you look at Monero, it's sort of a top 20 or top 30. I don't know, it's about top 20 somewhere. So until you sort of break through that point of getting into this market that sort of keeps itself up, we're going to be, it's a bit of an uphill battle until we get to there, and then you sort of like get kept there. So in my mind, there's sort of like this stage where we are right now, which is trying to push to this point of self-sustaining as a project, where the software works really well, the users are really happy, and you have this organic growth, and then you have this sort of mega growth phase. I think Signal has like 100 million plus users. Like, to think right now, if we were to jump from 400,000 ish to like a few million in 6 months time, it'd be ballistic. It'd be crazy, and I don't really see us like growing straight from like where we are today with Session to Signal size in a 6 month period. But I do see sort of, as Key mentioned before, like these other projects have been going for a long time. So to really take that market and to jump into those positions really quickly would be pretty wild. It's not really like our goal isn't just to take those markets straight away, but we are sort of scaling and growing as we go. And we'll face some challenges with teething and all that, but yeah, I see us like right now we're in this like growth phase, and then we get into this like self-sustaining phase, and then later we'll have this like hyper scaled phase. So yeah, it's gonna be a journey.
Just
It's definitely going to be a big J.
On the session side, as Key and Chris have mentioned, we've been really pushing that and have gotten session into a good shape. We are expanding our LokiNet team. We have a new full-time person coming in right after Christmas to try and do that same thing and really push up LokiNet in the coming year, to try and do the same thing, because we know LokiNet's not perfect. We know there's stuff that has to improve in it to make it a good experience, but we really want to work on that.
Excellent. All right, the next one is for you as well, Jason. So I know that you've been working on SOGs for a while now and done a fair bit of work on it. This question is about Sessions UI for really large communities with sort of hundreds or even thousands of people, and saying that the UI doesn't really work very well when the numbers get that large. It's not perfect on desktop and it's pretty bad on mobile. Will we ever see some kind of overhauls to make communities work more similarly to Discord or Element? Or I know that Telegram also now has you can sort of create channels within a large like group chat as well.
Yes. So it's been on our idea of where session is going long term, that there will be sort of an easier way to create open groups, rather than have to rent your own server and do it. So it's coming in that respect. Just in terms of setting up an open group, I don't know when. There's a lot of planning and build out that has to go in, but it is something that's definitely been on our radar. In terms of the actual UI, I'm almost certainly the wrong person to ask. I mean, if you've ever seen my UIs, it's, go to deb.oxen.io and you see this nice plain text page, and that's my UI. That's what I like. But I do think that we've seen a lot of UI improvements in session, and I'm hoping that, one of the reasons that I'm hoping this lib session util will work out well is that it'll actually let the UI people concentrate more on UI and not worry as much about the backend. So SOGs itself is pretty scalable. So we just going to take us some more time to build out those tools. But yeah, we do want to build them out to be more like, I'm not going to name names, but more like the common platforms that people are accustomed to. So, I mean, I agree right now, say Telegram is a more comfortable chat platform to use, but I want us to see us get there on session too. And I think we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, I will just say on the kind of more like session front end and like session client side, a lot of things have been developed in the PySogs, which is the session open group server. We have a lot of endpoints that we have access to now that haven't necessarily been implemented client side yet. So our whole administration strategy has just been beefed up server side recently with like read and write permissions for each individual user that you can assign. And that's going to give us the ability to make much more fine-grained UI decisions as well about, for example, how a group is moderated. It's just that we need to build out the front ends for that to actually occur. And right now that's taking a backseat to the work that we're doing on closed groups, because we think that it's really important to fix closed groups and also to fix disappearing messages, which we've had a lot of people interested in that being fixed too. So I think open group moderation is super important, and there's a lot of work that primarily needs to happen on the client side that we just need to schedule in after we've finished those other tasks that we were talking about.
There's probably more to happen on the SOG side too. So one of the things that we have planned on the back end is an API where you can connect a bot up. So one of the big things that you see in a lot of groups on Discord or Telegram or other platforms is that you'll join and you'll have to pass some test, click a button, answer a math question, whatever. And we want to bring that kind of concept to open groups too, so that people can develop their own automated moderation tools, rather than just, hey, we have a bunch of moderators who can do things. So that's we have the sketch of the design of how that's going to work. It still needs to be implemented. I guess we're just waiting for the other stuff that's already there to get implemented before we start worrying about it.
Excellent. Next up, I've got a bit of a tricky question for Chris. Does the OPTF still hold a portion of the flip it was allocated, or do they sell it all OTC? If so, how much is left? How much was sold? What's the situation with the flip, Chris? The people want to know.
The people, they want to know. Well, I'm not going to tell them, so sorry. No, I'll tell you something, but I can't answer that question for you. I apologize. What I can say is we did sell a good chunk of the flip, or a small chunk actually, and that's one of the reasons that I'm so confident in our runway at this stage. So we sold a small percentage. We put that in the bank, and that's really secured our runway for a decent period of time, and we still have substantial stake in Flip as a project as well that we will hold for the future. And we're also probably going to be staking Chainflip as well. So it's can't give too much details, but we're excited about that project. We're looking forward to working with them as well in the future. And yeah, we still have a good chunk.
I suppose while we're on the topic of Chainflip, I may as well ask a bit of a follow-up to that one, Chris, which is, can Oxen be listed on Chainflip, or will it be?
Anything is possible, Sir Alex. I'll get on the call. I'll get on the call with the Chainflip team. I think I know where one of them are located at this stage, and I'll put the pressure on. I'll turn the screws. So I'll see what I can do. I can't make any promises right now, but I've got their number. I've got their number.
Excellent. And this one is probably both he and Jason. Feel free to jump in on this one. Will the eventual session wallet have Chainflip integration? And I suppose, will Wallet 3 have Chainflip integration is probably also an interesting question to ask. Chainflip lists Oxen, session integrates Chainflip. Seems like a fair deal.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard from the Chainflip team, wallet integration should be extremely simple. They should have a very simple API. So if if Oxen is supported, then I think it would be very easy to integrate Oxen swaps into other cryptocurrencies that the Chainflip supports. It's kind of a very generalized system where they kind of give you an address that you send to on the native chain that you're on, and then they give you they pay you out at a native address on another chain. So the API for that's fairly simple to integrate into a wallet.
Yeah, I don't actually have much to add over what Key said there. But, I mean, I'll just say, Wallet 3, we've been talking about it for a while. It is moving forward, albeit slowly because we've got a lot of other priorities going, but it hasn't been forgotten. But it was, the whole reason for us to pursue it is to really make it easier to do things like eventually have it integrated in Session, if that's where we want to go, or have it integrated in Chainflip. So it's a long-term project to get that off the ground, but it's coming along.
Excellent. All right. A question for you, Jason. What moderation or power tools can we expect in the next 6 months or so?
I assume that's a SOGS related question.
I would assume so, yes.
So probably the first thing that we would see is Session front-end clients gaining more granular moderator abilities. So one of the things that we have in SOGS is we have different levels of moderators. So a room can have a moderator or an admin, but then you can also have server-wide moderators and admins who can control all rooms. And currently that's not exposed in Session. You can set it up on the back end. Session doesn't entirely understand it. It just sort of treats everyone as just generic moderators. It doesn't distinguish between them, but I think there are plans to beef that up in Session, so that Session can say, hey, this guy's a moderator, or this guy's an admin. And so you can have a better ability to sort of say, hey, I want to appoint new moderators, but I don't have to be worried that I have to appoint them as admins, because admins could come in and do bad things to my group, like change the name and kick me off as an admin and other things that you don't want to happen. So that's probably the most immediate thing. Longer term, I think we would come back to the ability to write scripts that interact with your SOGs, as I was mentioning a few minutes ago.
I would also say, like, there's a few features that we have been waiting a while to implement, which are already on the server side. So, for example, pinned messages, something that we haven't implemented client side yet, but is supported server side, or well, on the SOG side. We also have like group descriptions and stuff, also supported on the SOG server side, but not supported client side yet. There's a bunch of functionalities like that which we haven't necessarily set up. There's also, like, for example, we don't have support for changing the group name or group profile image in a lot of the clients. Like, for example, on Android, you can't do that. On iOS, you can't do that. Most of our functionality is focusing around desktop. So bringing that functionality to be able to add administrators, block, ban, by session ID into the other platforms, I think is one of our focuses as well. When we get into that sort of moderation bent.
A couple other things to just add to what Keith said. There are also whispers, which have been in there for a while, and this allows a moderator to send a message that only a certain person in the room will receive. As you mentioned earlier, we actually did use that for our language filtering when we put that out, but that's the first actual use of that feature. The other thing that we have is the ability to ban or revoke permissions with a timer. So you can say, hey, I want to block this guy from posting anything for 24 hours. So he can still read messages, he just can't post any new ones. So that's in there. It's just a matter of we need to work it through the front end to support all these things.
Yeah, I think by sort of halfway through next year, the application will be so honed for just a much better experience for every user in those sort of communities. We really want to focus on growing the communities over the next 3 to 6 months, and we see that as like one of the really good steps to get a lot of organic growth with the right sort of people in the right sort of communities. So yeah, it's definitely one of our major focuses to get the community moderation much more improved. It's gonna be great.
Excellent. All right, we're just coming up on about 5 minutes left for the scheduled time that we have. So I'm going to move on and start jumping around a little bit in the questions list that I've got here to make sure that we answer all of the mission critical questions that we have. So this one is for you, Chris. How do you measure sessions MAU? Do you have anything to go by other than download numbers alone?
We don't actually usually go off download numbers because it's not really a good indicator. I think if you look on Google Play Store, it probably says like +1 million. Anyway, that's probably not the major indicator that we use. It is nice to see +1 million downloads on Android. That's great. We actually have a somewhat complicated system that we use based off little bits of data from different points, be it like app stores, some network activity that we sort of can work out as like a percentage. Anyway, kind of complicated. We have app store data that we can use. We have network traffic data, and the number that we try and communicate to the community is very, it's like our safer number, if that makes sense. So like we don't want to like overestimate. We sort of have this quite specific estimate that we come to based off all the data that we have access to.
Currently, the MAU numbers, I believe, are mostly derived from the Google and Apple stores, because those are the most accurate data points we get on individual devices and stuff. But yeah, I mean, those are obviously incomplete because we have a lot of people who download the APK or through F-Droid or on Session Desktop, and those users are very hard for us to track, like intentionally so. But yeah, we try to make estimates where we can.
Yeah, and it's not really about downloads for us. It's more about retention. Like retention is a number one. Like, are you do you have the application? Are you using it consistently? How often are you using it? Do you still enjoy it? And that's sort of that organic, continuous upwards growth that you get from that, rather than just downloads.
Yeah, I remember hopping on a call with a rep from Google a while ago, because it was sort of when we were looking into data analytics and calculating MAU and all of these problems. And the first thing he said when we got on the call, he was like, "Okay, so yeah, you guys have Firebase, in the application, right?" And we were like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, well then, in that case, yeah, I can't help you at all." So the question is really complex and really unusual, and a lot of the people that you would normally get a lot of knowledge share from are basically just like, "Yeah, you're on your own," when you come and say, "Yeah, no, privacy actually does matter to us."
I'd say like a big thing as well. Like this isn't so much on the calculating the MAU numbers, but understanding where those numbers come from. A lot of that is just like by talking to people on session or participating in the open groups. Like, for example, when we see a massive Farsi influx into our official open groups, we know that that's likely that the new users that are joining session are from Iran, or we see the same thing with Chinese users joining. Like, that colors a lot of our perception in terms of where people are coming from when they're joining the application.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw out one more fact just in case people think it's a little bit too wishy-washy. We actually do have some concrete numbers that we look at the number of distinct accounts that have messages stored on our foundation server swarms. And that doesn't tell us everything that's happening on the network, but it does give us a good estimate. But of course, that doesn't actually give us the monthly active users, because that only tells us what's happening over a 14-day span. So, so that gets thrown in along with other things. But there is some measurable stuff that goes into it. It's not just hand. Yeah.
This will be the last early bird question that we'll take, and then we'll move on to a bit of a lightning round to do some live questions. So this one is either for Key and Jason. Probably you'll both have some words to say about this. How far are we in terms of LokiNet integration into Session? I would love to have the ability to host SOGs anonymously over LokiNet without exposing server IP.
Well, you can already do that with the SOGs. It's just that the session clients won't support connecting to it, except for Session Desktop. Session Desktop will, if you run LokiNet in the background and connect to it. But that's not very useful because most people use on Android and iOS. But yeah, I mean, we're really focusing right now on the hardest platform, which is iOS. So we're trying to get LokiNet integrated into iOS first, and the hope is that well, it actually is integrated right now. LokiNet is integrated into iOS in this test version of the application that we have. It's just not performing to the level that we would do a release with it. And then the idea is we can get it working on iOS. We should be able to get it working on Android and desktop, because those should be relatively easier platforms with less network restrictions on us. But yeah, Jason can talk more about like the specifics of LibLokiNet. Yeah.
Yeah, so we undertook developing that LibLokiNet, I think, maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago. We sort of started down that process. But it hasn't actually been used up until now, when we've actually started integrating it into Session Client. So it's been a pretty big learning experience. It's not just a matter of taking LokiNet that we have and plugging it into Session. We've actually had to develop a separate communication channel because it works in a very different way. When you run LokiNet, it's meant to run sort of at the center of your networking, so that when you do lookups, it gives you back this IP address, and that goes to a tunnel on your system. And we can do that on Linux, Mac, Windows, Mac fairly recently, but I'm happy about having a working Mac release out now. But on a mobile platform, it's very different because you can't have a tunnel. Mobile devices are very locked down. You're really constrained to what you can actually do on the device. So we have a very different way of working there, where the session client has to basically make calls into LokiNet in order to establish paths and then send things along those paths. So it's definitely less seamless than on desktop, where on desktop you just run LokiNet and anything now has LokiNet connectivity. Here we have this other path that we're developing, or we're working out the kinks on it now. So it does work sometimes. We just want it to work all the time before we're ready to put it in a release.
All right. Time to move on to some of the live questions that people have been popping in the chat and in the Oxen community on the session while we've all been chatting away for the last hour or so. But before I jump into them, is everybody okay if we just go for another 5 minutes or so? Is that all right with everybody? I'm seeing nods. I'm not seeing any looks of terror. Okay, excellent. Now, first, I'm actually going to ask a question to myself, I suppose, in a way, because I think I'm probably the best person to answer this. But if the team wants to grow the open source aspect, is additional marketing considered? A space like this meeting may draw greater interest as a Twitter space rather than a YouTube live stream, for example. Funny you mentioned that. We actually did a Twitter space yesterday. Key and I hopped on a chat with Cam, who handles all of our socials, and we went for about half an hour, and we saw, I would say it went really well, actually. It was more session focused, whereas this is obviously more of an Oxen community event. But we saw a lot of people coming and joining. A lot of people came and stayed for the entire chat, which was really awesome to see. I saw a number of people that we definitely want to be interested in and using session, like journalists and civil society, people popping into the channel, lots of emoji reacts. And overall, it was a really good experience. And it was the first Twitter space that we've done so far as well. So it was good to get a really positive experience first up, and we'll definitely be doing more of them when we come back next year as well. We'll probably try them out for Oxen. I might be able to wrangle Jason into doing one. Who knows what the possibilities may be, but yeah, I think something that we definitely will be doing is doing longer Twitter spaces as well. We kept it kind of brief just while we were experimenting with it yesterday, but yes, absolutely. We will be trying to grow the open source aspects, and we will be doing Twitter spaces. Okay, now a question. I'll leave all of the live questions open to the floor, I think, for now. So what technical obstacles exist in terms of exit nodes? Does the team foresee substantive progress towards exit nodes in 2023?
That's 2 questions. Should have to pay twice as much. So the technical, on the technical side, there's not really obstacles in terms of running exit nodes. The obstacles really are in making that exit, creating what we've been calling an exit marketplace, and make that something sustainable. Because if we're the only one running an exit node, it doesn't scale, right? And we want an ecosystem of other people running exit nodes over LokiNet. So the chance of that coming in 2023 is actually pretty good. It's going to be one of our focuses. I can't guarantee it, but it's on our roadmap.
Excellent. All right. Another LokiNet question, which is this one, I think will probably be for you, Jason. Is there any ongoing development for Alpine Linux or OpenWRT? I really want to run this thing in Docker with the least amount of privileges.
So, yes. Mainly, Technical Tumbleweed has been pushing it on the OpenWRT side. He doesn't work on it all the time, but it's kind of a hobby for him to poke at it, and he does have working builds, which are pretty cool. LokiNet on a router is actually a really great way to run LokiNet. I have it on my home network, so all my devices everywhere have LokiNet connectivity. So I can just call up blocks.loki on anything and just have it. So LokiNet has been designed kind of from the beginning to be able to do that, and it's fantastic that Tactical Tumbleweed has pursued it, and we certainly support him as much as we can. At some point, we may internalize that development, but at the moment, he's the guy to talk to.
Excellent. This one is for Chris. If monetization does succeed and keeps the project afloat, what is your overall strategy to drive Oxen price continuing forward?
So in other words, win moon.
Yeah, win-win. Yeah, so like session monetization is not the end of things, you know, like it's just sort of one. It's a peculiar question. The future of the project isn't just monetizing session. I really would like to see sort of multiple stages of this and multiple stages of LokiNet. Keeping the price afloat in the future. I think the economic model that we've always pushed for is monetizing, features, using that funding to sort of buy Oxen or like engage more with Oxen. And I think that, the more people we bring to the project, the more attention we bring to the project, the more positive economic pressure we put on Oxen. I'm trying to really tiptoe around, like not giving people financial advice, not getting sued or like getting taken out of context here. But yeah, I can't make any promises about increasing the price of Oxen in the future, and I'm not interested in doing that. But with everything we do, we need to bring value back to Oxen as the sort of Oxen privacy ecosystem to make sure that the applications can work on top properly. But I can't. I don't think I can answer that question how people want it answered. But it's sort of I don't know if that was even helpful. Bit of a fluff round. I apologize. If anyone else wants to have a crack, please go for it.
Yeah, I would just say if we've gotten to, like the question was kind of asking, if we've gotten to a point where the project is sustainable just through its monetization, I would say that's really good. And all we need to do at that point is continue to grow our applications, because the more we grow our applications, the more money would feed back into the Oxen ecosystem. There would also be more cost as well, because the service nodes are doing more work, right? So we need to keep their emission, or their emission would increase naturally because the Oxen price would be going up. But that's the point of the network, right? Like as more people use it, they feed money back into the network, and then the network gets paid more for more users, and it's like a cyclical thing. So, yeah.
So I was joking, half joking when I said win moon, but actually it really is, because when we get to the point that it's self-sustaining, the network is taking off. So yeah, actually those are the same question.
Yeah, it's a tough question to say. If everything is going really well and you're successful and the plans and the strategies have worked really well, sort of how can you continue that?
What are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do next? And I think from there, it's just continue to scale.
Yeah.
Continue to take market share, continue to scale. And, if we've done something really, really successful and really right, as we're sort of planning and strategizing to do, then keep capitalizing it, I guess, is the game plan.
Excellent. All right, another question for you, Chris. Is successful monetization of session the only way to get Oxen through the next year?
Not really reliant on session monetization to get to the next year at all. We have enough runway. We have enough runway past that point and beyond. We have substantially more than that. So getting session monetized it's more about, so for the network, allowing people to do high file transfers, or there's certain things that really tax the network, and we need to make sure that the network is being rewarded for that. So it's less about us, and it's more about making sure the network is being rewarded effectively enough to continue to run.
Awesome. And I think I will leave this as the last question, this next one that I'm going to ask, and I think we'll end it there, and this one is open to anybody if they've got anything to say. Monero recently got its own DEX, which is basic swap. Are there any endeavors to get Oxen integrated there?
I haven't read about that DEX, but I'd have to do some research on how it works. Curious if it's like an atomic swap DEX, or it's using some other technology, because obviously we have the Chainflip team that are working on what I would think is the kind of best version of cross-chain swapping. So maybe if it's similar to that, we could look at an integration, but yeah, be curious to understand the technology around it.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there for the live questions for today, and we'll start wrapping it up. But before I fully get to closing down the stream, I'm going to get everyone a chance to get up on their soapbox if there are any issues that they really want to talk about right now, while you've got everyone here watching, then the floor is yours.
Really, I'm super excited about early next year, kind of Q1 next year, because that should be when the closed group upgrades for session and the disappearing message upgrades for session are coming out. And I think it's going to really increase our growth, especially the closed group stuff. We've struggled a while with that. And I think it's really natural when you bring your friends into a messaging application to jump in a closed group and start chatting with each other. And if that experience isn't good, I think you definitely see an attrition of people who join. So when we get that fixed up and the disappearing message thing, which is like, when people, restore an account, they're seeing messages come back. I think those are the two big things that we hear often. And fixing those up, I think, is going to really boost session in Q1 next year. So I'm super excited for that. And also very excited for LokiNet integration as well, because of the speed improvements that's going to bring to session. So yeah, Q1, Q2 next year, I'm like super hype about. Like probably, yeah, one of the more exciting periods of the project, definitely.
Frustratingly, I completely agree with what Key just said, because I've been hyping that up as well for the last X amount of months. And I guess like the thing that brings me a lot of excitement from what Key just said, is that we have a few 100,000 users now. What's going to happen when we have a few million users? What's going to change? How we're going to scale? And I think those sort of building blocks are going to really accelerate the project for organic growth. And completely agree with you, Key. I think that's probably the most exciting thing over the next couple quarters.
So my excitement usually has to go beyond that, because usually when I'm thinking and working on something, it's on something that's not coming for 6 months or more. But I'm actually pretty excited with where we are in LokiNet and how Wallet 3 is coming and how SOGs and LibSession are coming. I feel like we're really, as a team, we're really coming together cohesively to great level, and I'm really excited to see what's happening there. So I'm going to carry on working on the stuff on the back end, and you'll see the stuff that I'm doing 6 months or later. And then if you want to see what happens earlier, well, talk to these two guys.
Yeah, I'm actually also very excited about the next couple of years as well. I think that we're going to change many of the things we sort of do to operate as an organization. I think that we've sort of been slotting a lot of these things in over the last few months, and I'm really excited for not just next year with closed groups and a lot of the really awesome features that we have, and doing some form of MVP monetization. I'm really excited for what we do sort of the year after that as well. And that's sort of the stuff I've been sort of focusing and thinking about at the moment. I don't want to share it. I'm sorry. There's a bit of a little teaser taster. But over the next few months, a little bit more focus into sort of what the future looks like exactly. And then sharing that with the community as well, as we push towards not just session, LokiNet monetization, but sort of the future of the whole project as well, and where we want to take things.
I would say I'm going to make a bold prediction as well. We're gonna see some massive followers of session next year. Some massive public figures who are gonna start tweeting and using session. I think it's already happening. We saw Jack, the former CEO of Twitter, follow the session account recently. I think we're gonna see more really huge people start pushing session. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, hopefully. On the back of that, Jack, if you're listening, if you're watching, give us a bell. Let's make some things happen.
Wonderful. All right. Well, hopefully we're going to have to wrap it up here, because I'm sure that Jack is about to ring Chris, and he's going to have to go take that call. So thank you to Key, Jason, and Chris for being here today, taking the time. I know, for Jason over in Canada, not necessarily the easiest time to attend a live stream event. Thank you to all of the community members who took the time to come and watch us and hang out with us today, and all the people, of course, that submitted questions and are just always around contributing to the discussion and the discourse about Oxen. We'll probably do another one of these, or we definitely will do another one of these events next year. So let us know what you thought of the format, whether you want it to stay similar to the way that it is, if you want us to change certain aspects or things. Always open to that feedback, so leave a comment, send a message to anyone on the team that you can get in touch with, and we'll sort it out from there. So thank you, everybody, and that's it from us today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
See ya.
Everybody.
Bye, all.
Hashtag